So a little bit about Knowledgepool. My sales and marketing team wouldn't forgive me if I didn't mention something about Knowledgepool. So basically, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but we are a managed learning service. So we basically are an outsourced provider for managed learning that goes across learning consultancy and design within your own organizations, but as well as apprenticeships and different areas of learning, so all learning orientated. The learning industry is fairly new to analytics, and that's been part of our journey. Basically, MI ruled in the learning industry. A little bit about where we sit and how we operate as a business as well, just to give you, basically to give you a bit of understanding about what our journey is all about. So our clients are private sector clients, banks, insurance companies, etc., telecommunications, but also we support the public sector as well, so a lot of government organizations, departments, agencies, etc. We also work with a number of learning partners, so these are the actual suppliers that produce the training, do the training in some instances where we don't direct deliver. But Knowledgepool as a whole, where there's over 500 employees in the organization, we sit across 32 different offices across Europe and the UK, and so yeah, that gives you a bit of an understanding of where we're coming from and how we operate in the market. So, I joined Knowledgepool 18 months ago, and a little bit about the challenge that I walked into, or decided to take up. So we were in a position, obviously like a lot of you, we had a mix of different types of data, operational data, transactions, financial data, telephony, you name it, help desks, etc. We've got, as I mentioned, we've got over 300 clients spread across the private and the public sector, 7,000 learning partners, so our supply chain, and 7 different in-house systems, let alone client systems or supplier systems as well to deal with. All of our reporting back to the clients and internally was being done in Excel, Excel dashboards. I had a team then of 6 Excel analysts. It would take them up to 10 working days a month just to produce that data. Most of the times, somebody would change a column somewhere in the source data and everything would fall over, and then my team would sit there trying to put it all back together again with a lot of difficulty and a lot of frustration. Another challenge was numerous versions of the truth, depending on which system you ran the data out of, who had put the report together, how they'd put it together. You got a different story being told across the board, internally and externally. So yeah, the challenge. Always up for a challenge, that's why I'm stood up here today, I think. And so when I joined the organization, there was Utopia, what they wanted. So what the business wanted, what the clients were asking for. We haven't met we haven't quite got to Utopia yet, but what I'll go through today is how far we've come since then. So the feedback that we were getting, obviously internally from the business and from our clients and via the client teams, was everybody wanted a single source of truth. So anybody walking into a meeting, either with their clients or internally, wanted to be saying the same thing, otherwise you end up with lots of discussions and debates about whose data was right. We also needed, because we're quite a dynamic organization in terms of the different areas that we support, you've got the, as I said, private sector managed learning, you've got apprenticeships, all using data in different ways. There's different compliance standards that we have to adhere to, internally and externally. So we needed to be quite flexible in terms of pulling ad hoc, one-off, sometimes we're going to use it types of data sources into a system to give us that kind of flexibility. One of the big, especially with GDPR kicking in, for anybody who works across Europe, GDPR kicking in earlier on in the year, data protection, we needed to have a secure way of delivering reporting, but especially to our clients. Excel wasn't going to cut it anymore, definitely not sending it via email. And then also another thing was real-time reporting. Obviously, with the monthly sort of churn of data reports that was going out, it was a static report, it was produced once a month, sent out. Lots of things can change within a day, let alone a month, but nobody had any visibility of what those changes were on a day-to-day basis. So we wanted to introduce as near real-time reporting as we could, being realistic, of course. Another ask was white labeling. We didn't want our clients to get confused with different brands. Getting an email from SISENSE, as nice as it would be, would confuse them in terms of, an activation email for their account activation. So we wanted to be able to white label everything from the communications we sent out from the tool to the actual tool itself and what the dashboards and reports looked like. So we could tailor it as well to meet the clients' logos and color palettes, etc. Obviously, internally, the business needed a holistic view of what was going on across the business. So our senior leadership team needed to be, have a look across the whole organization, as different as it was in the different areas, and be able to actually know what decisions needed to be made based on information rather than gut instinct. And then obviously better visualization, going away from MI and actually producing some kind of business intelligence. So moving away from raw data dumps and going into something more dynamic, something that could work better for decision making as well. And then obviously the end of the utopia, or not quite, because as most things happen, as you start to deliver things, people want more things, but was the predictive analytics. Rather than looking backwards at what happened the previous month, how could we use that information to then predict what would happen using trends, etc., what would happen in the future. So I'm not going to go into too much detail around this one, but this is just basically our technology landscape at the moment. It is ever-changing, but we basically have operations systems internally, different, Salesforce, CRM tools, telephony tools. Finance have their own system, SAP, that nobody quite understands how it works, except for finance. And then the booking system, so where learners could connect directly from their own internal in-house learning management system. So, if anybody's booked a course internally in your organization, it's actually that data going from your own system into our systems and then feeding through into our data warehouse. We decided to use a SQL data warehouse, mainly to transform the data. In most cases, with a lot of this data coming in, and I'll go into that in a bit more detail in terms of our lessons learned. But data isn't always clean and isn't always in the format that you expect it to be in or would like it to be in. So we did put in a data warehouse layer to actually use as a transformation platform, so a staging area, so to speak, to get the data in a format that we could use reliably. And then, as you can see, where SISENSE fits in at the moment. So we do have external data sources feeding directly into SISENSE. These are clean data sources, and also our ad hoc data sources, where we don't really need to do the whole ETL process in SQL, because we know we're going to probably use it once or twice, and then nobody's actually going to look at it again. And then data quality monitoring. I always have a difficulty saying that. So again, as I said, with the challenges of data coming in from different sources, we implemented a data quality monitoring function within the organization, and we actually use SISENSE really well to leverage that, but I'll go through that in more detail. And then obviously we've got our dashboards and reports across the different areas of the business, internally, to our supply chain, and to the clients. How we use SISENSE, the licensing structure that we chose to use. So we wanted to make our dashboards and reporting available to anybody and everybody, internally, externally, that needs to use it from a client perspective. We didn't want to have the arguments with finance about how many more licenses we needed, or oh, we've got a new client on board, and just basically scalability. We needed to be able to scale up as easily as possible. So we went for an unlimited viewers license option. We have 3 administrators licenses, so basically we have 3 people who look after the system configuration. Historically, we've sort of shifted some bits around a little bit, but they look after password administration, people forgetting passwords, etc., and also the permissions and groups, because as I said, security and access to the systems is really key, especially where our clients are within the public sector. And then we have our data designer licenses, which is a fairly new addition. So we've actually given our analysts more control over the data modeling, which has worked really well. It allows them also to understand, rather than relying on 1 or 2 people within the admin team to explain to them where the fields have come from or how the data has been built. We've given them the flexibility to actually use their own instinctiveness and actually work with the data models themselves. And then we've also got the designer licenses, which were used predominantly by the analysts before we moved to the data designers model, but now they're used by the report developers, so the actual guys who are building the dashboards. But the idea is to shift that slightly, and I'll go into that in a bit more detail. So when SISENSE met Knowledge Pool, starts, first lines of any great romance. But so we sat down with, obviously, our customer success manager at SISENSE and discussed sort of what we were planning to do and how we wanted to phase it out. Hopefully you can see that on the screen. It's a bit weirder when it comes up on a big screen. But basically, it's just our steps. I'm not going to go through step by step, but I will pick out a few things that were key for us. We needed to be able to use, don't forget we had Excel analysts. We needed a solution that would be easy to upskill those analysts on. We didn't want to get rid of all the, obviously, business knowledge that those guys had gained over the years, but we wanted them to be able to upskill and use a tool that wasn't, didn't need an 8-month course somewhere in the middle of nowhere before they could use it. And it was something that they could use and learn to use as they did their jobs. Another key thing about that was that it enabled them to actually deliver training internally on how to use their dashboards. Obviously, they'd built the dashboards, so with some support from, obviously, SISENSE support, we were able to actually go out and train the people who were delivering the dashboards too, which was really useful. And we put together a user guide with frequently asked questions, but that was all off the back of the guys, obviously, developing the dashboards and learning how to use the functionality within the tool itself. And so, this is what we did. So we got rid of, we got rid of SISENSE branding on everything, and we welcomed our clients and our internal teams to Knowledge Pool Insight. There was a lot of debate around the naming of the tool, but I won't go into that. But basically, this is just a quick example of what it looks like. We are now in a position where we've got over 400 live dashboards out to clients and supply chain and internally as well. The tool is being used. I'm keen to some of the additional features that we've discussed today would be really key for us, because it gives us a better understanding of who's using the tool and how they're using the tool, which will obviously make us build in improvements for the way we put dashboards together, etc., to help us move forward. So that was phase one. We completed phase one about 2 months ago. So now all our client base are using Insight or SISENSE. So out of phase one, there was some lessons learned around data quality, as it would be the case. So we rolled out phase two very quickly, which was around the data quality monitoring and actually using SISENSE to give visibility to the operational team, so the people who actually put the data into the systems, because some of that data isn't generated automatically. We have a help desk function. You've got customer services. You've got requests for really bespoke training courses. I won't go into some of those, but some of that information has to be manually entered into systems. So being able to give those teams who are responsible for that visibility of where we have issues with the data, it gives them a bit more graphical representation rather than us beating them up about, oh, you haven't put the right data in the right field again. So that's where we rolled the data quality monitoring dashboards. We obviously, at the moment, and again, I'm really keen to hear more about the data profiling, because what we had to do in this interim when we were rolling out the data quality monitoring is actually build the rules within SQL. So we have our conditions for what looks good in terms of data, and actually build those rules in SQL and then present the results in dashboards, which obviously you can drill down into further detail to look at the detail behind that. But this is just a quick example of one of our data quality management dashboards. So basically, the red boxes are where we're not great, the green boxes are where it's great, and then they can drill down. I'm not sure if you can see that very clearly now, looking at it, but they could drill down into that further detail to understand what made up those red boxes and get it fixed as soon as possible. Our refresh works from our data warehouse, from our source systems and our data warehouse into SISENSE, works on a 24-hour refresh. So it was they could quickly see that any changes made to the source systems today would be reflected in their dashboards the next day. the lessons learned bit, the favourite part of it. So definitely some of the challenges we faced was around dirty data, as I've gone through. But also, I think we underestimated the impact on people and change. That moving, that change from Excel and everybody being very comfortable with their spreadsheets to actually moving to using SISENSE and actually being able to use the dashboards rather than automatically wanting to see the raw data. So one of the lessons learned, I think, would have been to try and engage people earlier on in the journey, rather than at UAT testing or user testing stage, to actually get them involved in the transition from Excel to in SISENSE earlier on in the journey. In addition, I would have implemented the data quality monitoring earlier had I not realized the full extent to what how that would impact, obviously, not only the integrity of our dashboards and our reporting, because obviously all you need to do is produce one number wrong once and everybody just decides that no, it's not worth using that report anymore. So I would have, with hindsight, I would have introduced the data quality monitoring earlier on in the process as well. So yeah, that's our journey so far. Just to give you a quick overview of where our next steps are, so where we're focusing next year. So we definitely want to start to introduce more predictive analytics, both internally and externally. Within the learning and development industry, analytics is a buzzword that's used a lot, but nobody actually knows what learning analytics are. So what we want to be is one of the market leaders in terms of actually producing that benchmark, what are learning analytics, and if we can sort of produce the roadmap for learning analytics, that will give us obviously an advantage against our competitors, but also it'll bring a lot more insight, different data sources into the mix, whether that's social media, whatever it is. People learn differently, how much e-learning. My Chief Technology Officer, who's here as well today, they're making huge steps in terms of user interface from learning. We want to be able to support that from an analytics point of view, so that all the fancy stuff and all the AI that happens up the front, we want to be able to implement that as well in the back end. We obviously want to, so when I was talking about at the moment our designer licenses are just being used by the team internally, what we want to be able to do is now to empower the different departments within Knowledgepool itself to actually self-serve on BI, now that we've got the data into structures that we're comfortable with, and now they've gotten used to using the tool from a viewer's point of view. We want to get them more involved with actually self-serving on the BI and start to answer their own questions, especially around finance and operations, where there's sort of a high turnover of information on a daily basis. If they can get more hands-on with the data, I think it will help them make decisions quicker as well. And then I suppose the next bit for us as an organisation is now to actually start to use the data to actually work better with our supply chain. So actually segment our supply chain, profile them, be able to understand the different sectors, how they work. If somebody who's offering Prince 2 training, for instance, compared to somebody who's offering underwater basket weaving or whatever it might be, how they work differently, how the different sectors work, whether it's online better for one or face-to-face only works for another. So yeah, it's a really exciting time for us at Knowledgepool, and definitely from the BI team's perspective, we're actually starting to do some BI, which is really great. Okay, I'm not sure if anybody's got any questions, but yeah, in a nutshell, that's us.